Hey, I'm Alan Firstenberg,
Hi, I'm Sam Witteveen.
and welcome back to Two Voice Devs.
Voice Devs.
Sam, so
Oh,
good to have you back on the show.
it's great to see you again. It was IO when we last caught up, right? That's almost 2 months ago. Okay.
That can't be 2 months ago. Oh wow,
Uh,
it's been this summer has been going like gangbusters already. I just things happen, and I suddenly look up and I have no idea where this industry has advanced to in the past week, the past month, the past 2 months. So big case in point, I feel like suddenly everybody is talking about harnesses. And I don't know when they started talking about harnesses. I feel like this was something that went whooshing by me that I didn't fully grasp. And I kind of get the idea, but really it boils down to what is a harness?
so I look, my technical definition of this is sort of like the fixed scaffolding around a model, right? This is what turns a
Okay.
model into an agent. Right, so a model is basically just a one-shot call. You put something in the context window, you get something out. Then how do you deal with what you get out, and then what tools do you put around it? Uh, Things like skills. We've seen skills come along really, big in the last 6 months or so. Things like sub agents are part of harnesses. Things like memory and different kinds of memory and stuff like that. Um, Even things like lifecycle hooks of knowing, to call observability, knowing to call different things like that. All these elements make up the sort of scaffolding and the harness that go around the model.
Okay. But it seems to me like this was always there,
It,
wasn't it? I mean,
so it was.
but it's what we were calling an agent.
Yes, right. In the past, people talked more about the frameworks, right? So we talked about LangChain, we talked about OpenAI agents or things like that, the frameworks around them. The the difference, I guess, with people moving to talking about the harness and harness engineering and things like that, is that in many ways it's become a lot more formalized, where the coding agents now have got so good that you don't necessarily need something like LangChain, right? At VentureBeat, we did a really interesting interview with Jerry Liu from Llama Index. And he'd written a really interesting article basically saying that like the agent frameworks or, a lot of these frameworks you just don't need them anymore. And which is pretty amazing considering he came up with Llama Index, right? And that was sort
Yeah.
of one of the things. Now, it wasn't that he was sort of dumping on that or dumping on other frameworks and stuff. The point he was making was that, you know, I is that all of these things can be done by code. And yes, there's some really good primitives that some of the frameworks have, and some of those things get used. But more and more, when I talk to people, that are doing stuff in industry, when they go to production, they're using something very bespoke. So they might do their prototyping in something like, Claude managed agents, perhaps even LangGraph, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But when they go to production, they often, are customizing it for their specific use case. And often that just means you go into Claude Code, you go into your favorite coding agent, and you say, okay, simplify this and just write it for me in Python, in Go, in Rust, in whatever language you want. Right? The whole thing with coding agents now has gotten so good. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, let me get to, is that
Okay.
we've now got some really good best practices that have come out of things like Claude Code, have come out of some of the other agents that have been really successful about what should you actually have around the model to make a strong agent. And those are things like sandboxes has become a really core thing, right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Agent loops has become a really core thing. File systems, giving your agent access to a file system, giving it a very specific kind of planning where it's got maybe a to-do list where it maintains that as a tool so that it can basically look up it can decompose your task. It can then basically spin those out to sub agents if they can be done in parallel. and it can then check them off as they're done, so that it's kind of, being able to stay on top of these long running processes. And I think that's probably one of the big things that we've seen, is that we've seen things where when we were talking about agents last year, we were talking about things that they were better than chatbots, but they
Yeah,
weren't
but
hugely better than chatbots, right?
so it seems like we're finally getting to the point where we're beginning to talk about autonomous agents and the framework where those autonomous agents are running. Is
It,
that kind of
they're,
where a
they're,
harness lives?
certainly, they're certainly more off the rails. So, one of the things that I would say, and let me explain what I mean by that, right? That
That doesn't have a good connotation to
Well,
it.
no, it does. It does. Let me explain what I mean. So, okay, we both know LangChain. One of the things that Harrison and Lance and the team there originally, when they built LangGraph, was they understood that you need to get the model to, be stochastic at what it, can be good at, but try and make other things deterministic as much as
Yes.
possible, right?
Yeah.
And so LangGraph is built like that. It's a directed acyclic graph, right? It's a DAG. And you can pick from this node, you can limit it that you can only go to this node, you can only go to this node. And that was very deliberate at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember, 2024 and maybe 2025 and stuff like that, talking with Harrison about this. And basically at the time, the models just weren't good enough, right? This was the thing. And you had Sam Altman, going on lots of podcasts saying, no, the models are just going to be really good. They're going to, they're going to be able to do all of this themselves, right? You don't need to over-engineer it. And he was right, but everyone thought, the way he was talking about it, that was going to be GPT-5, and it wasn't GPT-5, right? It actually turned out to be one of the Opus 4.5, 4.6 kind of models that sort of December last year, the models hit an inflection point. And that inflection point really meant that things started working that just didn't work, before.
So by working, these are now the models and agents that can plan what the correct next step is and come out with that large plan and be able to follow through on that step by step
Yeah,
without
they're just
too many guardrails.
They're much more consistent. They still will require some guardrails, but this is what I mean by they're off the rails more, right? That LangGraph fix sort of, this is where the rails go. The agent cannot do anything, from that. And if you go back to the origins of that came out of the team that is now Cognition, right? When they were Codium, they published this sort of first agent for doing code related stuff. At the time, that became clear that, yeah, you really want to limit these things. Now, as the models got better, right, suddenly things like Claude Code just became so powerful, sort of December last year. And, I've been using Claude Code for over a year now, right? And it was really good before, but suddenly in like late November, early December, it just got wow, right? Like everyone was just like, okay, this thing can now write code. And it can do it where I can, be a lot more trusting in what I get it to write. It can do a lot more long-term sort of, planning and thinking with that.
Okay.
To put these things together. And I think that was probably one of the first ones that we saw like that. And then from that, and it was, and even the Claude Code team would say that, it was that model, that particular Opus model, that allowed it to sort of take off. At the same time, we sort of saw OpenClaw or ClaudeBot take off not long after that, right? Early Jan, something like that. We started to see that take off. And again, people were raving about it when they were using it with this model because it was sort of off the rails. It had a heartbeat. It had, some guidance from some markdown files. It had the ability to use skills. And then it was able to then put these things together in a way that didn't wipe too many people's hard drives. Let's put it that way, right?
Many people. I mean, I'll be honest. Part of the reason why I haven't gone to OpenClaw, the part of the reason why I have this hesitancy about what I do hear about the harnesses is that it really feels like there's just no constraints and no security and none of that, and we're trusting our prompting of the models to do the right thing. And are these models really that good that they're listening to their prompting?
So
I could
that was
trust it.
true. That was definitely true at the start of the year, right? And for the first, probably the first quarter of this year, Nvidia brought out NemoClaw, but NemoClaw wasn't the story there. The real story there was OpenShell. And what OpenShell does is lock down an environment. And so with these things, you can literally lock down an environment, like with Docker Sandboxes, it's a micro VM. You can determine which ports can go in and out. So it can call, if you want to run it with a local model, you can call LM Studio. If you want to run it with a cloud model, you can call Open Router. You can set those. You can set which tool APIs it can call, but it can't do anything else. And you can limit what it can read and write to your disk, right, in its own sandbox. So when you've got that kind of safety now it's fine to actually let the model, try things out. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to work. And I probably wouldn't give it read-write access to my email, to my database, stuff like that.
This is kind of my feeling about some of these is, when I think about what I'd like an autonomous agent to do, I think of things like, I do want it to be able to send me mail every morning in a very limited way. So I wanted to have access to my mail, but not email everybody. I feel like the permissions that I want to be able to give these tools is a lot more fine grained than what I'm hearing. And maybe I'm just not hearing it yet, but that's
No, it's
kind
not. So
of
I think what the way people are doing that at the moment is you give it its own email address, and it can email you, and you can email it, but it's limited in. It's not going to be getting all your emails and suddenly just inviting everyone around to your Fourth of July
yeah.
party or
I
something
mean,
like that.
that's a solution that I hear, but I'm like, but I want, there are times now. Security is a whole other issue that we could spend an hour on. I am quite sure. So okay, so what I guess I am hearing is that what the harness is kind of the manifestation of these autonomous agents. It's everything that's needed to be able to make these autonomous agents somewhat work correctly.
Yeah,
And
I think
that's, the various tool components, the skills, the permissioning, the auditing, the logging, the observability, all of that stuff. Oh yeah, and the model.
yeah. At its core, though, it's a loop, right? At its core, it's the loop,
And
right?
I'm freaking out about this because yeah, you say that, and I'm like, but we were talking about loops being the core of agents back in the LangGraph days. I mean, as you said, that's what LangGraph was. Everything that I was doing, I mean, even before then, what we were saying was, you're doing this, it's taking the input, it's processing it, it's evaluating it, giving it back to the human, and then looping until it happens again. You know, it, in some ways, this seems so obvious and there, and I'm trying to wrap my head around what the big deal is.
Look, you're right. It's just I would say the biggest thing is that people have formalized it a lot more now. So
Okay.
that's where we're at the point now where people have formalized it. Interestingly, like LangGraph and that whole sort of very locked down version is now not the sort of norm, right? So even Harrison, we had Harrison on VentureBeat podcast as well, and at the time, Harrison was very and still is very pro deep agents now. So they see the deep agents more as the thing going forward, perhaps, and deep agents still uses LangGraph at the lower level, right? It's not like they've thrown out LangGraph or anything, but the deep more now a framework for incorporating sandboxes, code execution, tools, skills, different kinds of agent loops, and giving it more autonomy in that sort of thing where it can use a file system, where it can use, these kinds of things.
So in this context of everything, you were talking about, we're seeing these more formalized products, and these are things like I mean, is OpenClaw still a thing? Is that still out there
Yeah,
and being
well,
used?
now the probably the most popular one would be Hermes Agent, right? I is
Okay.
that's taking over from OpenClaw. I fundamentally, in many ways, still the same thing. There are differences and stuff like that, but I that idea of having some kind of agent that either runs on your computer, runs on a server, a bunch of different things for you with a set of skills, with a bunch of cron jobs, with with this sort of heartbeat mechanism that triggers it to be a bit more proactive and sort of it can decide itself to go and do something, right? That's
Okay.
sort of
So that's two. Is Claude Code considered a harness these days? Because I know
yeah,
people use
yeah.
it for more than just code these days.
Yeah, definitely. Claude Code is like probably Claude Code in many ways is the harness that has inspired a lot of the other ones.
Okay.
Um, you know,
Where does the anti-gravity family of stuff fit into all of this?
again, another very similar kind of thing. It's sort of Google's, or at the time it was the windsurf people were working on their own sort of thing. They got acquired by Google. That became anti-gravity. And one of the things with anti-gravity was that you at the start you had that VS Code sort of interface, a la Cursor and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but you also had the agent interface of where you just talk to it and it goes and takes care of and they got sort of bitten a bit after IO, if you remember, that they took away at least the button for the IDE
Yeah.
and everyone freaked out, right? For a couple of days until they put it
That
back.
that migration was not a smooth migration, from what I hear.
Yeah, they're obviously moving fast, breaking things, having to put them back together at times.
Heavy on the breaking things part. Um, I think one of the interesting aspects about anti-gravity that I keep coming back to is what in some ways they've called their managed agents API, which is as I think I understand it, it's an anti-gravity API. So it's a hosted anti-gravity that you connect to. Is that kind of what it is?
So, uh, in typical Google sense, they've got six things that do the same thing, right?
Of course.
So there's anti-gravity, the sort of coding agent tool piece of software that we all know. There's now anti-gravity CLI, which replaced Gemini CLI. Different team that
Sort of.
made it, though, right? It's the anti-gravity team that made it and stuff like that. Um, it's They have the anti-gravity SDK, and then they now have, I think it's actually called Gemini Managed Agents, which one of those agents is like an anti-gravity agent. And Anthropic basically had Claude Code. They brought out the Claude Code SDK, which just became the Claude SDK, or the Claude Agent, sorry, SDK. They then brought out managed agents, and had these as three separate things. And Google seems to be going down the same path, right? You've got your managed agents is where, at least from what I see from the Google's one, and also from Anthropic, is like, okay, I don't want to have to worry about sandboxes. I don't want to have to worry about, file sessions. I don't want to have to worry about all that. You manage it all for me. I'm just going to tell the agent, these are the skills I want. This is the basic sort of, outline of how they should work. And then it will put it together for you.
Well, I mean, that's part of what looking at it keeps getting me confused. Is I'm looking at it and I'm going, so they're just spinning up a VM and running it in this VM. Once again, I feel like I'm missing something
I,
somewhere, and I don't know. I don't know what or where is the problem.
So I guess the way to think about that is that it's safer in their VM to wipe the drive than on your VM.
Yes.
Right? The Look, really at sort of the managed agent is kind of in the middle, right? So you've got the software, which is the fully formed agent, right? Claude Code, anti-gravity, right? You can't really change how the harness works in that. The harness is given to you. You use the harness by prompting it, by telling it what you want. Maybe you can add tools, maybe you can add skills, you can do those sorts of things. But fundamentally, it's already got its sandboxes taken care of, it's got its code execution, however it's going to use the model, that kind of thing. On the other extreme, you've got the SDKs, where you've got the SDK, you have to kind of do everything. In many ways, kind of similar to an ADK, a LangChain, something like that. Maybe a little bit more opinionated in regards to how you build the agent. And then the managed agent sits in the middle, where you've got, it can do things for you. You don't have to spin up the sandbox. As far as I know, Gemini managed agents doesn't support external sandboxes. The Claude one does now. That was a new feature that they released, I think, last month or just after I/O. That where you can use other service providers for your sandboxes. And that can be good, that if for example, you use Cloudflare for a lot of things, you can use the Cloudflare sandboxes. And also that was their response to a lot of people saying, hey, I don't want to give you control, right? I'm happy to use your model, but if I'm using your model, your code execution, your sandbox, I'm tied in here for life, right? So I want to be able to have the ability to switch things out. And that's one of the cool things is like Claude Agent SDK can actually run on Google Cloud fine, right? You can actually spin it up on Cloud Run. You can basically do this just like you can with the Antigravity SDK, right? So you can, if you want to have fine grain control, you can do that. The managed ones is where you're using, their cloud to some degree. And the advantage of that is then your agent and your sort of harness is sitting right next to the model. So you've got much faster, you're not having to go, hey, call the model, bring it back here. My harness does something, call the model again, bring it back here, right?
I mean, in my mind, the biggest advantage of that is, you don't have to walk around with your laptop half open. It's it's there in the cloud running, doing your work for you, and you don't have to worry about it, the power outage at home, the whatever. It's out there running for you already. And to me, that seems like a massive advantage.
It is an advantage. Yes, the challenge becomes like how much control do you want to have, right? You can set up an OpenClaw, a Hermes, on a VPS system now, right? And that's quite good that you can actually, get it going. It can go 24/7, all those sorts of things. For a lot of things, people maybe don't want that. They want a lot more control of, okay, this is how I want the harness to work. This is how I want it, I want it to do things like fine grain control. They go for the SDKs. And they go for like, okay, now I'm going to engineer the loop. I'm going to basically work out how the file system's going to work. I'm going to decide, not just the tools. And I guess like, the managed ones, already you're kind of getting some tools just by the fact that it's a managed agent. You're getting things usually like file system, sandbox, code execution, a number of, of maybe even sort of web search, with Google, some things like that.
I was going to say, well, getting file search, that's great, but, it also means it's now wandering all over your local disk. And that's, again, the trade-off with the remote one is now I don't have access to all my local files anymore. On the other hand, that also means I don't have access to all my local files anymore. So it's real trade-off there.
Yeah, you've definitely got to decide for what you want. And the way I like to think about it is, see, okay, most people don't realize, or most people don't think about, they realize it when you point it out, but most people don't think about that OpenClaw and Hermes Agent are single-tenant applications. Really, they're not built for, you can't take one OpenClaw and scale it to 10,000 users, right? It just doesn't work, right?
Right.
Okay, you can take one managed agent and scale that up to 10,000 users, right? So where you've got something that you want to run on your local machine or something like that, okay, yeah, then you've got a lot more fine-grained control. And if you're going to scale that up, you're going to need to put it in a cloud. You're going to need to do a bunch of things with it. So there are different use cases. The managed agents and things like ADK are much more built for multi-tenant applications, multi-tenant agents, where you've got lots of users, they're all doing the same thing. You want to make sure that your context doesn't pollute from one user to another. You want to have separation of, data. You want to have all the sort of stock standard stuff that we think about when we're building a cloud app, right? That's where those things make sense. OpenClaw, not for that kind of thing at all, right? It's great for one person, but if you look at it, we haven't seen the OpenClaw ones take off in the same way of where people, I would say you've kind of got the prosumer people using OpenClaw and Hermes, right?
Yes.
Where they pay for a VPS, they pay $100 for a year or whatever it is, a couple $100 for a year. They then press, on the thing, one-click launch Hermes Agent. Here's my gateway key. I stick that in. I now basically connect it to Telegram. I now connect it to Slack. I now connect it to the different things I want it to do. And then they have a conversation with it about the skills that they want. And it either goes to a skills library and pulls them down, or they upload them, or they teach it. And it's a great agent for the one person, right? It's super highly customized. But it just doesn't scale, right? It's not something that most people's grandmothers are going to be able to go, oh yeah, right. I want an agent. Let me spin up OpenClaw, right? But
here's the thing. Do you think that Claude Code or Antigravity in their cloud managed form are able to be more consumer level?
Yeah, if people build the front end to them and build the other sort of connectors and stuff like that to a normal cloud, to a normal database and stuff like that, sure, they can, yeah. And people are doing that already, right?
Okay.
I should be careful that I won't say the guest, but one of the people that I'm interviewing next week at Transform in the pre-call, this is a big company, public company, they're doing all their prototyping with Claude managed agents. And once it all works, the only reason why they don't use that when they go fully into production is because they want to do a lot of things bespoke. And that's because they want to do things like having hooks that listen for certain events, that trigger other things in their company, that trigger other things in their database, all of which makes more sense to go a bit more low level and have full control. But the prototyping idea of like, hey, can we just get an idea of, is this going to work as an agent? Spin it up in the managed agents.
Okay.
Now, for people, if they don't have all that requirements, they don't have a huge engineering team, the managed agents make a lot of sense to spin up and be able to do that.
Okay, Sam, this has been fantastic. I still feel like I have this tenuous, very, very tenuous grasp on what these sorts of things are. I think kind of my biggest fear was I was hearing them talking about, and they seemed like they were this massive thing that I just didn't understand. And they really seem kind of straightforward. They're autonomous agents. I mean, is that a correct summary? They're autonomous agents?
You have to be careful. When you throw around the word autonomous, people think of all these different things. They're agents with a lot more autonomy. Let me put it that way.
Okay. I will go with that. This has been fantastic. I knew if I turned to you, I would be able to get some more clarity on this issue. So I really, really appreciate it. As always, where can folks find you?
Best place would be probably my YouTube channel, or I co-host the VentureBeat podcast where we interview people in industry that are building this stuff, looking at stuff like that. Or the other place would be Twitter, I guess.
So thank you again. Folks have questions, find you there. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and share. And Sam, I hope to have you back another time on Two Voice Devs.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Sam.